Have you ever felt like your kindness was never quite enough? Have you ever given every part of yourself to someone, hoping they'd finally appreciate you, only to realize they just expected more? What happens to the person who is always trying to please, who bends their boundaries and silences their needs, all in the name of keeping the peace? Beneath the surface of every eager smile lies a quiet exhaustion that never really leaves. There's a cost to being a people-pleaser that most never see until it's too late. It matters because the habit feels so innocent at first, just trying to help, just being agreeable. But over time it eats away at your sense of self until you hardly recognize who you've become. Psychologists often trace this pattern back to childhoods marked by unpredictable affection or harsh disapproval. Many people-pleasers learned early that their safety, their belonging, depended on making themselves small, agreeable, and endlessly giving. Attachment theory suggests that children raised in emotionally unstable environments often grow up hypervigilant to the moods of others. That learned sensitivity can later morph into a compulsion to please, creating adults who feel a deep, unspoken terror of disappointing anyone. Even if the world looks very different around them, the drive to soothe and serve remains. Because, for a people-pleaser, approval often feels like survival. Have you noticed that people-pleasers rarely voice what they truly want? They'll offer their time, their energy, their attention, sometimes without being asked. Because to them, the fear of losing someone is more painful than losing themselves. They scan every conversation for subtle signs of displeasure, every interaction for the slightest frown. And then they work twice as hard to smooth it over. Consider the employee who agrees to every project despite an overflowing schedule, or the friend who drops their own plans whenever someone asks. On the surface, it looks like generosity. Underneath, it's a quiet panic that says, if they stop being useful, they might stop being loved. The dark truth is that their worth feels conditional, measured only by how much they can give. And what happens when someone lives this way too long? Exhaustion is inevitable. A people-pleaser often reaches a point where they cannot recognize their own thoughts or feelings anymore. Research into self-determination theory reveals that humans need autonomy and authenticity to thrive. But a people-pleaser rarely allows themselves either.
Every yes
They give to someone else as a silent no to themselves. Imagine a partner who agrees to dinner with their in-laws every weekend, even though they crave one quiet night at home. Imagine someone who agrees to help every friend move, but cannot remember the last time someone showed up for them. It's a slow, draining depletion that feels like you're always running on empty. And when that emptiness finally catches up to them, the people-pleaser is left wondering where they disappeared. And this is what so few people understand. People-pleasing is not really about kindness. It's about control. Beneath the constant acquiescing is a desperate attempt to manage other people's emotions so that they never have to face rejection. This behavior is rooted in fear, often learned in environments where asserting oneself was punished or ignored. Studies into codependency show that people-pleasers often struggle with blurred emotional boundaries. They absorb the moods of those around them as if they were their own. Every compliment feels like a reprieve. Every criticism feels like a verdict. What could feel like compassion on the outside often masks the deeper belief that love must be earned endlessly and perfectly. Have you ever wondered what happens when a people-pleaser can no longer maintain the act? Burnout. The crash that comes after years of putting everyone else first. They hit a wall, emotionally, physically, mentally, and suddenly, all those careful habits unravel. They might resent the very people they spent years trying to please. They might feel manipulated or unseen, despite their constant presence. And they may discover that some of those connections were never as real as they thought. Because when a people-pleaser stops playing their part, some people leave without hesitation. That is the most painful truth. They stayed for the service, not for the soul.
And so the question becomes,
what would happen if they finally put themselves first? That is where the shift begins. The first quiet, honest no. The first small acknowledgement that their needs matter too. Every boundary they draw is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. It doesn't come easily. Many people-pleasers will feel guilty at first, as if saying no is some kind of betrayal. But that guilt is simply the echo of an old pattern. It's the residue of years spent convinced they had to earn their place. Breaking this cycle takes patience. It takes practice. It takes believing, maybe for the first time, that they are enough as they are. And that belief is more radical than most people ever realize. Every small moment, a people pleaser honors their own feelings. Every time they choose not to overextend. Every time they give themselves permission to matter, they reclaim a piece of themselves that was long overlooked. They discover that real connection, the kind built on honesty and mutual care, doesn't vanish when they stop performing. The right people will stay. Ones who relied on them to stay small will drift away. And that is a loss they can finally afford. There is a deep, quiet strength in choosing authenticity over approval. It's never loud or flashy. It looks like telling someone you can't help this time. It looks like allowing a pause before agreeing to anything. It looks like realizing that disappointing someone else is sometimes the only way to stop disappointing yourself. It is the most liberating kind of honesty, the kind that reminds you that you are more than what you do for others. And when you embrace that honesty, you'll find yourself no longer exhausted by the effort to please. The emptiness that once followed you begins to ease, replaced by a gentler, steadier sense of self. The people pleaser inside you, so long driven by fear, can finally rest. And you can begin to live, not as someone who exists for everyone else, but as someone who exists simply and fully for yourself. Protect your energy. Stay curious. Subscribe for more from Beneath the Cortex.